All right, to be mindful of everybody's time, we're going to go live. We're going to kick this thing off. We have a excellent conversation planned for you this afternoon. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Good evening. Martin and I are going to go through a lot of content. We're going to pack a lot in for the next 45 minutes. We want to talk about where things are right now. Things move so fast in the world of cyber insurance, cyber risk, living and breathing and operating online. So we're going to talk about the threats that businesses are experiencing. We're also importantly going to talk about the insurance aspect as well as some risk mitigation techniques that organizations can take to be better secure, to protect themselves, the client data that they have, and certainly to be able to obtain favorable cyber insurance rates and the best possible terms and conditions that the marketplace will bear today. So without further ado, my name is David Derigiotis. I'm the president of brokerage and head of insurance with Flow Specialty. I've been in the specialty insurance space for 21 years now. At this point, I have a privacy and security related background. I'm a certified information privacy professional, a certified information privacy manager, and a fellow of information privacy with the International Association of Privacy Professionals. I've been handling cyber risk for many years now, working with many different carrier partners, both as a broker as well as on the captive, the MGA, and the carrier side. So I bring a lot of variety in terms of what I've seen within the marketplace from broking, from underwriting, risk analysis. And I'm also very grateful today to have Martin Hinton with us, who's the editor in chief of Cyber Insurance News. Martin, I want to turn it over to you just so you can give a great intro on your background as well.
David, thanks very much for having me. So I have not been in specialty insurance for 20 plus years, but I have been in journalism, television production, writing, and communication for over 30. I've been in this beat, if you will, for over a year now. And it started as a business idea, as a sort of niche news site. And quite quickly, I became aware of how big this problem is, from large companies and nations down to small mom and pop businesses. And I guess a hallmark, if I could claim it to my career, is explaining complicated things in the terms that people understand. And I've encountered a lot of acronyms and language in this space. And I think that given the scope of the problem, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, I try to lean into a plainer language. So hopefully that's an area where I can help to make it clear just how important it is to take this concern seriously. And as you put it quite well, it's fast moving and ever evolving, which can be very frustrating for small businesses already dealing with a lot on their own. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and I hope I have some value to offer.
No question about it, Martin. Thank you for being here because I know the audience is going to get a lot from this conversation. I have found that cyber risk, cybersecurity, and cyber insurance, which goes hand in hand with that, there's so much jargon, there's so much complexity to it. So being able to break it down in a manner that people can understand is so important. And you talked about it's the perfect segue now for to kick this thing off and to get into the first slide, small businesses. Verizon just released their new study. I think if anybody can get out there and grab the Verizon data breach report, it's a great study and research that's done on all sorts of data breaches, cybersecurity incidents that have happened. They reviewed 22,000 different security incidents that have taken place, and they do an updated report every single year. Small business is a big part of the organizations that are impacted. There are only 500 Fortune 500 companies, and there are 34 million or so smaller businesses, small to mid-sized businesses that are out there in the United States. So that's the big grouping of organizations that really need insurance, that have to be wary of being attacked, having issues take place, ransomware, social engineering. From your perspective, Martin, what have you seen across the overall business landscape that would be applicable to those small mom and pop businesses that are out there?
Well, I would just say that your point, we did a piece this week, maybe it was up today, on the Verizon report. And you note Verizon, big company, big name. We see their ads everywhere. The report is heavily from the beginning about small and medium-sized businesses. And I think that one of the biases that really exists in news and media and information is where you spend your time is where you see the problem. And it's a problem. I think that, when you consider the way cyber events and cyber attacks are reported, we obviously require of publicly traded companies, and then there's the healthcare environment that has the requirement, but a lot of it goes under discussed and underreported. And it's an enormous problem. And I think that you don't quite appreciate this because you don't hear about it a lot. And when you do, it has this sort of vapory sense. But I've said to you, and I've encountered this from a lot of small and medium-sized business owners, there's almost a teenage mentality about the threat. A bit like the high schooler who thinks it just won't happen to them, so they can behave badly, or they can keep their password taped under their keyboard, or not worry about whether or not their Wi-Fi is secure, or whatever else they might be doing, and they won't become the subject of a business email compromise or a ransomware attack. And it's simply not true. And I don't like to be hyperbolic, because our business and journalism gets a bad knock for making people scared all the time. One of the things that really drew me to this and has made me really kind of interested in it is that it's scary. There's a real threat here, from the nation state level down to, again, like a 3 or 4 chain dry cleaner in the Southwest. They have stuff that's valuable, and people will come to steal it.
Martin, you mentioned taping the password to the keyboard or placing it under the keyboard. I've seen that time and time again, walking through different offices, doing different visits. And if you look at the Verizon data breach report, abuse of credentials was the #1 factor, the way organizations have become compromised. So we're not talking about, like you mentioned, nation state all the way down. A lot of times it's not this sophisticated 0-day or this very advanced attack. It's people that are reusing passwords. It's people that are using the same email address across all the different online activities that they have. So I think an important takeaway is it doesn't have to be overly complex, or you don't have to blow out the budget to do things to protect your organization, to protect the data. As a small business, I often think it's a lot of the basic blocking and tackling that can go so far from you or for you. So it's going to be having a variety of long, strong, complex passwords, not reusing them. Certainly a password manager goes a long way. I'll tell you, I don't even know what my passwords are. They're locked up in the password manager that I use. So those things are so important that I think small businesses could adopt. That can be the difference between becoming compromised and being secure and protecting all of your data and staying out of the headlines, for that matter. Now, you brought up ransomware. As we move on to the next slide, ransomware is huge. Ransomware continues to be a problem. The insurance industry as a whole, and rightfully so, has paid out a ton of claims, because that's where organizations are just getting smashed with some of the most financially devastating incidents that are taking place. 60 or so, or it's 80 or so ransomware organizations are live and active right now. 16 new ones popped up since January of this year. What's your take on the world of ransomware and what's going on right now?
Well, it's rampant. I mean, I think that the comparative I would use to say cybersecurity in this day and age is a bit like banks in the reconstruction era of the Wild West. No insurance. Your security is a guy chewing tobacco with a shotgun next to you. It is wide open, and it's very, very easy to do. And one of the things that's happened with technology in general is it's created a more friction-free environment to do trade. That's great. We can do business much, much faster. Documents can be signed. We don't have to fax things. Those same efficiencies apply in the criminal world. And when it comes to ransomware, I think a lot of people think, well, why would they care about my data? They don't care about your data. It doesn't matter whose data it is. What we know is that your information is valuable beyond you on the dark web to people who are going to get involved in identity theft and other things. And there is a real concern here. It is how to put it. It's the breaking and entering of cybercrime. It is everywhere. It is the petty theft of cybercrime. Anyone can do it. It's not like sneakers where you need to know how to code. You can go to the dark web, get some software to do it, and you're off and running as a cyber criminal.
100%. You talk about not needing to know how to code. You're spot on. The ecosystem, and this is what I've seen. I've done a lot of research on the dark web, and I've seen the way a lot of the claims have been paid out for policyholders. That the ecosystem is made up of a couple of different groups. You have the one group that creates the ransomware, and you have another group that will license it from them. So this other group doesn't have the technical capability, the technical know-how to develop some incredible ransomware strain malware that they can use to infect an organization with. But what this first group has is credentials. They found a way into the organization. So you have what are called access brokers. These access brokers who have your username and password team up with the group that actually created the ransomware. They bring those things together and they take advantage of companies. And we were talking a little bit about small businesses to open this thing up. I'll tell you, and you and I were talking about this, Martin, a couple of days ago. On the dark web, you can go through and scroll through all of these different PR pages. These ransomware groups have PR pages on the dark web. And what they do is they advertise all the different organizations that they've taken advantage of, that they've compromised, because they do it as a threat. They say, look, if you don't pay up, we're just going to dump all the information that we collected online. And you said it best. They don't care about the information that they're getting. They want the money. They want to be paid. It doesn't matter. So if you go through and look at all of these different ransomware groups that operate online, you will see business after organization that never make the headlines. The everyday business doesn't make the headlines because it's not some big, incredible headline. You hear about the large corporations, you hear about the government entities that have gotten popped with ransomware. Those make for clicks, and it's scary when you see that. But you don't read about the small dentist down the street, or the consulting firm, or the small engineering or architectural firm that was hit with ransomware. And I'll tell you, I've seen page after page of all of these organizations that are just trying to go, paycheck to paycheck, run their business, take care of their community. They don't make the news, but they're absolutely experiencing the fallout from ransomware.
Yeah, I mean, I took a look at a couple of recent articles on this, and there are a ton of cybersecurity reports put out by various companies, and they vary because they're surveys or polls, if you will, but they're consistently in the same space. 75% of ransomware affects companies with 11 to 1,000 employees, right? That's one study, right? And we got another one here where the 46% rise in ransomware incidents and a 47% jump in losses for small and medium-sized businesses. So it is pervasive. And having been in journalism for 30 years, I can promise you, when a story becomes bland, it becomes the runs, hits, and errors. It's a bit like the box score for the baseball game. It goes to the back of the paper, and maybe you look at it. If you're really interested in it, you drill down at the numbers, and you can see the game in your head. This is, unless it's MGM or, United Healthcare, it is too hard to explain and a bit abstract. So that's not useful in the news business when it comes to getting people's attention. So it goes underreported.
And it can be hard for, I think, the smaller businesses to see the value. At least I think they've come a long way in understanding the value of insurance and certainly security, because the days are kind of long gone where all you heard about in the earlier days of like Target or Home Depot, and you think that's not me. I'm not these large. Or you mentioned MGM. Caesars was another big one. The casinos that got hit. I'm not them. I don't have to worry about it. But I think that the everyday entrepreneur, the small business owner, they are overall becoming, I think, more educated within the space and understanding that if they don't have some form of protection in place, you can go bankrupt. You could be out of business. If you can't access your client information, what do? You're in a lot of trouble. So I think understanding the ways that you can protect yourself, we have some risk mitigation strategies here on the right-hand side that are very basic, but they're so important. Having multiple forms of data backup can go a long way. But I'll tell you, I've seen claims, Martin, where the organization's like, oh yeah, we do data backups. We have all of that. The problem is they didn't do a practice drill where they look to recover all of that data, doing like a dry run over the weekend. They hadn't done that ever. So when they experienced the ransomware event and they said they had backups, they weren't able to fully recover because they never had practiced or gone through that motion. So I think having the backups is an important part of it, offline, offsite, in the cloud, wherever it may be, multiple places, but then doing a practice, restoration, restoring all of that information is important as well. You got to go through them and do the fire drill.
Go ahead. I was going to say you couldn't be more right. And I think you're just moving on to the next point. You have to have a plan for when things go wrong, and you have to practice. These are the things we learned growing up if we played sports and all sorts of other worlds. So I just want to reiterate this idea that crisis response, which I've got some experience with in the communication sense. You need to have a plan, and then you also have to absorb that old adage that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And then you need to be able to adapt and move forward. But you have to imagine it and practice a little bit.
100%. I'm glad you reiterated that because I think that is so important. Again, I've seen that be a point of failure for many organizations. And I know the next one, multi-factor authentication. I know that's a pain point. It's a pain point for people, for all of us, even to have these different MFA apps or to get these text codes, which I don't recommend using your cell phone for MFA. But if it's the difference between not doing it at all and doing it, do that as the lowest bar for MFA. But having MFA in place, that's so important. That goes so far in terms of not just giving up the password. Because if you have the password and email address, you're skating right into the system. You have some serious problems.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
the
and
case.
again, putting it in simple terms, it's a bit like having one lock versus two lock on your door. Nothing is guaranteed to stop the criminal. But if you make yourself a slightly harder target to your neighbor, then these are follow the path of least resistant people. And there is a lot without any resistance at all. So it's just, a little bit more, something simple can make a big difference.
When you're out trying to outrun a bear, you just have to be faster than the slowest person, right? I mean, you want them to move
Exactly.
past you and go to somebody else. That's what it's all about. And having the incident response plan, like you mentioned, that practicing, knowing what to do, who do we notify, who's going to be contacted, what are the steps that we need to take if there is an incident. It's having that playbook that goes a long way. And cyber insurance can do some of that as well. Cyber insurance is more than just financial risk transfer. I mean, I see it almost as an investment because it comes with so many resources, it comes with so many tools that businesses can take advantage of. The employee training, the phishing awareness, having access to a variety of attorneys that specialize in privacy and cybersecurity law that can help with crafting policies for your organization. So it goes a long way. Doing all of these things, as you mentioned, there's no silver bullet for any of these things, Martin, but that security is all about layers. So the more that you layer in, the better off your organization is going to be.
I'd just like to chime in there and your point about the value of cyber insurance. When you're dealing with potential customers, now's a time where the market is right for them, right? Because you're not just offering the policy, you're offering the policy plus how to fireproof your home or how to install the alarm or what kind of alarm to get. So there is this opportunity to value add more than just as you point out, the coverage amount, right? There's something more to it in the day and age that we exist in now, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, where there's a lot of opportunity for growth with regard to writing policies, as I see it.
I completely agree with you. If we talk about ransomware here, business email compromise and social engineering is another huge area. This is an area where again, in addition to ransomware, the insurance industry has paid a lot of losses. The latest FBI Internet Complaint Center report that we had on business email compromise was $2.9 billion in losses. And as you mentioned, a lot of these figures are underreported. So I can assure you the number is much higher than 2.9 billion. That's just one source in terms of getting information regarding the losses around these. What's your take on social engineering, AI enhanced business email compromise? What are you seeing from like the reporting side, the investigations?
Well, Henry Ford came along with the assembly line and the Model T, and we're in that day and age with regard to this stuff. We are at the beginning of the beginning. So as amazing as it is, and as much as many industries have adopted AI for various efficiencies and that sort of thing, the ability to use this for both good and bad are in their infancy, right? We're still in the nursery. So I think when you look at business email compromise, it's stunning to me. I mean, one of the examples that I come to when I think about it is you interrupt the email of a company that transports exotic cars. And this happened. A baseball player signs a new contract, goes and buys himself a $350,000, I think it was a Lamborghini. He arranges for it to be shipped to his home. The email and the invoicing is intercepted via an business email compromise, and they just ship the car to a different address, and poof, it's gone. And whose fault is that? Well, I guess it depends on how it happened and all that sort of thing. This is real. And then when you take AI, there's agentic AI, which I saw a seminar last night, is in its nascency. And what agentic means, it's agent. It has its own ability to make decisions after its initial prompt. So it has, the ability to adapt as it continues down its path. the seminar said this isn't really in use now, but regular AR, just for constructing emails and the frequency of things, it's a force multiplier in the old-fashioned sense. It creates the opportunity to attack 1,000 things instead of just 100 in a day. And volume, well, in sales, reach is everything, frequency is everything. When you can send 1,000 emails and you get a 10% return, that's 100. If you can only send 10, you only get one. It's that simple as I see it now.
So true. I mean, artificial intelligence allows people to 10x, to dramatically increase their productivity, to do things that they wouldn't be able to do at the rate and the speed that things are able to be done. And I think about from a social engineering standpoint, the ability to mass reach out to hundreds and thousands or millions of email addresses. A lot of these capabilities are there now in terms of just automating different tasks, but the AI is able to do so much more. I mean, think about the ability to create well-crafted profiles on individuals for social engineering. Before, it would take somebody, like when I've gone through and done different exercises, to gather information on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, or to find data breach uh, composites that have all of this information in it, to look for that person's email address, to compile all this information together, to have a good dossier on somebody. AI, like you mentioned, agentic AI, it can go off and do that for you, or it can dramatically improve the grammar and the tone and the way an email or text message will be drafted. So it really gives people the ability to level up. And
Yeah.
it's true on the good guy side, and as you mentioned, the bad guys are doing it too.
Well, like I think I made the joke when we first spoke about this seminar is that a car can be a getaway car or it can be the police car, right? So think about AI like a piece of technology like that. In the right hands, it's good. In the wrong hands, it's bad. It's really that simple, and I think that that's one way I like to think about it to help me pass. I'm not a tech person, and the idea that this is very real is something that matters to me, and it's interesting to think about it like that, and I try to.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. It's important to understand the way all of these things are being used, how it can be used for good, how it can be used against you. And I think something I want the audience to take away as it relates to insurance, typically you're going to see a sublimit for this area of coverage. You'll see anywhere from 100 to 250. Some carriers are going a little bit higher. You can push higher if you have a good broker that's able to go out to the marketplace and to put a good policy or policies together to address it. But you have social engineering, and often that doesn't involve a compromise of the network of an email. It's somebody that's just sending a spoofed email that looks like it's coming from accounting, or it looks like it's coming from a client. There's no compromise that takes place. They're just tricking the employee into initiating the transfer. Then you have EFT and fraud, cybercrime. That's when somebody gets into the system. That's when there is a compromise. And then they initiate that transfer. So those are two important areas I want everybody to make sure that they're looking at and paying attention to, because I've seen plenty of social engineering claims and business email compromise where there losses where there was actually no unauthorized access. They just responded to a spoofed email, and then the carrier denied that claim because it wasn't in line with what was necessary to trigger a true claim in a breach within that policy. So just pay close attention to that.
I think it's worth reiterating that we talked about technology helping with business and reducing friction. Email is this brilliant thing, but it is literally a pathway into and out of our company, your company, a company. And again, it's like the door. And the sophistication, I mean, again, it's tiny little things like changing the font in a single letter in the URL. It's amazing. And it's a lot of burden on employees and your regular training for this kind of thing. Really reiteration about the damage that can be done if you're not sure. If you're not sure, check. And there's some pretty good training out there because the human element of it is very real. It's easy to get conned. I think we don't like to think about it that we could all get conned. I've been the victim of a street con once in my life, and
Mm.
you think, how did that happen? Like what was I thinking? In hindsight, is a hill from which the view is perfect. Best not to get there.
Well said. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you stating that, because again, a lot of times the individual that gets tricked, you can feel this guilt or sense of shame that, oh, it shouldn't have happened to me. But again, a lot of times it just comes down to proper awareness and training. And the policies do come with all sorts of services like that will provide, again, the phishing awareness or the security awareness, so that you can know what is happening out there, what types of threat am I facing, how can I spot them, and how can we stop them. Technology helps with a lot of this, but just good old-fashioned training and education and being able to spot these things with your own eyes, it goes a long way too. So it's so important. Now, we talked about here business email compromise, big loss leader for the insurance industry, big loss leader for businesses. We talked about ransomware, again, huge loss leader for the insurance industry, huge loss leader for businesses. Now, the good old-fashioned supply chain, talking about when you're reliant on other technology service providers, on other vendors. I was looking through the Verizon, again, the Verizon data breach report, and they said third-party involvement doubled when they looked at the results. It went from 15% last year to 30% of the compromises. And you mentioned some interesting ones. You talked about United Health. That was a tie-in with ransomware as well as a third-party supply chain attack where they paid a $22 million, United Health paid a $22 million ransom payment because Change Healthcare, which is a company that they own that services thousands across the healthcare industry, they got hit with ransomware. So it created this just cascading effect that impacted so many organizations. What's your take in terms of what's going on right now? Our dependence on other companies, we're more digital, we're reliant on so many others to carry out the day-to-day operations of what we do.
Well, I mean, I think that the ability not to have to do everything yourself and to be able to hire a vendor for 1 day worth of work a week versus having someone in your office to do that job 40 hours a week, we see how that creates inefficiency and allows small businesses to, diversify or delegate, basically, is what we're talking about. The term supply chain always throws me because I feel like when I think of supply chain, I think about farm grows apple, apple goes on truck, apple winds up supermarket, I bring it home. And what I try to think about here is the idea that all of the vendors you might have, every point in your supply chain that is not you, that is not somewhere you're acutely aware of at least your cybersecurity coverage, your cybersecurity protocols. Those are all sort of soft, weak underbelly. So you think about links in a chain. Again, I'm a quick one for the analogies that try to make it simple for my simple mind. If you have one bad link in a 50-piece of chain, you have a way in. And you can get in because of the way all of these systems are interconnected. Again, for the efficiency that we love and is an enormous benefit to us, it also creates this vulnerability. So, when I look at the reporting, it's often they didn't know what the policy for the accounting firm they use is, or their lawyer didn't have multi-factor authentication for remote workers, or they didn't remind people not to use public Wi-Fi. Very, very basic things like that. And and most of the people probably watching know, you get inside and you linger or you act quickly. You're in the building. The call is coming from in the building.
I love the way you describe the chain, the link in the chain, understanding. I think that helps give such a good visual for it. And I appreciate the fact that you brought up knowing the policies, the procedures of those that you're working with or depending upon. It makes me think I really like New York, the state of New York, the Department of Financial Services. They have rules around cybersecurity and privacy practices. And one of the rules that they have is doing your due diligence and having a policy in place for any vendors, any third parties that you're working with. So it's so important to go through. And I know it's another thing, a burden, another thing that you have to add to the list. Your own cybersecurity and your posture and all of that is enough to deal with. But then you have to take a look at any other third party that you're relying on, that you're bringing in for services or for some capabilities for your organization. But New York has a great plan that they want organizations to put around the due diligence. I think it's so important to make sure anybody you're working with, their security better be at minimum what yours is or above. Because like you said, what are they doing in terms of their cybersecurity practices? What does their posture look like? Are they training their employees? Because if they get hit and you're dependent on them, it's either going to create a significant business interruption for you because they'll be down and whatever you're dependent on for them won't be able to be carried out for you. Or if they're accessing your system, if they're a gateway into your network and they've become compromised, now you've become compromised. So it's so important. Have a good plan around vetting and doing your due diligence and not just doing it once, but then you have to have a process set up to periodically check throughout the year to make sure things haven't changed, to make sure that they're still doing the things that they said they're doing, because it will protect you. It's going to put better safeguards around those that you're dependent upon, and it will allow you as a business to be able to plan better and to know that those that you're relying on have at least, as I mentioned, a security posture that's in line with you or better at best.
I think that's very right. There's that aphorism out of the Bible, I'm not my brother's keeper. You really need to be in this sense. And the
Yeah.
idea that we hear about big corporations elevating this problem to the C-suite level with CISO officers and that sort of thing. Amongst your vendors, you want to elevate it because you can help them know you're protecting them, they're protecting you. And because of this pace of evolution in the cybercrime space, if you will, the conversation needs to be one that you elevate to a level of importance. And complicated things, new bills, those are all a pain in the neck. Do it, would be my advice. Don't ignore it. It won't go away. It's the classic one. Better to have a conversation that's uncomfortable soon and not delay it, because most of the time you only ever regret delaying having a difficult conversation.
I agree with you completely. And from a cyber insurance standpoint, you'll want to look at some things within your policy. You have what's called dependent business interruption. And that means that if a third party, somebody that you're dependent upon, goes down and it causes a ripple effect for your organization to not be able to carry out the day-to-day activities to generate the income that you're dependent on them to do, your policy will reimburse you for that. So it will pay for the security event, the failure of somebody that you're dependent upon. And then you need to even go a step further into the policy language. So you want to make sure, some of them say it's just for IT related vendors, but you want to make sure that it's expanded to any business service provider as well. Because if it's IT related only, but you're dependent on the manufacturing or the trucking organization to get you the products or whatever it is that you're getting from them, that won't be covered if they experience some type of security event and then they're not able to deliver the goods or the services that you're reliant on them for. So make sure that you have dependent business interruption and it expands. Go ahead, Martin.
No, I was going to say the example I use with this is you think homeowners insurance and your home's covered, but all within homeowners insurance, there's, pipes breaking, fire, all these risks that exist within homeowners. And cyber insurance is very similar. There are lots of risks within the umbrella of cyber, and you want to make sure that A, you know what they are. B, your protection is the level that, equates to the risk you have depending on what business you're in and how you operate. And it is, again, it's a burden. And I hate to say it, I'm a small business owner, and I think the idea that you suddenly have all this stuff to deal with, never mind a new bill to pay, is irritating. And I really, based on what I've learned in the last year and a half about this problem, is I would encourage you to get past that irritation and address the real risk that exists out there.
I appreciate you sharing that. It is an irritation. I think you have to be able to depend on others. You don't have to know everything yourself, but I think aligning yourself with a good retail broker or a wholesale broker can help you be guided in that process. As a retail broker, if you specialize in it, that's phenomenal. A lot of them don't. There's just too much. You mentioned homeowners insurance. There's so many lines of business insurance that are out there. You can't be an expert in everything. I'm certainly not an expert in everything. So make sure that you align yourself with somebody who knows this space, somebody that has the relationships that can help guide you through the process, understanding what coverages are available, what steps can businesses take to not only be better protected in terms of their security posture, the data that they have, the data they're collecting and sharing, but how can they get the best terms and conditions available from the marketplace? Work with a broker that can help guide you through that process, because you're right, 100%, it is a huge irritation without question. Now, we talked a bit about third party. We talked about the supply chain. As we move into like data breaches, data breach, I think, was the big thing where cyber insurance kind of got started from. You think about being sued from, a class action litigation that takes place because there was a big data breach. You have to notify everybody. You put their identity at risk. We've seen those time and time again. Equifax was a huge one of the largest data breaches that we saw out there a number of years ago. What's your take in terms of what's happening across the spectrum from data breach fallout, the legal and financial harm that organizations and individuals experience?
Well, I think what I'd key in on is the second line in the slide, legal and financial storm. There's the event, and then there's the long tail of the aftermath. I don't think I need to tell a lot of people on this that lawyers are expensive. I come from a communications and public relations environment. That's expensive. If you're in public facing company, your reputation matters. You need your trust to be intact. And the number one issue, and typically the best thing to do in a crisis, is to admit it immediately, accept blame, and then come up with a solution. That's easy to say. That's when we get back to having a plan. But the big thing with the financial part of it is this sort of thing is expensive. Credit monitoring for 1,000 customers whose data got stolen, whatever it is, it adds up, and it adds up really, really quickly. It's that old saying, right? You go broke slowly and then really, really fast. It's got that kind of feeling to it for me, and I think that's something that you really need to think about outside of the initial recovering the data, getting your system back up and running. Well, then there's the 10, the 3, the 5,000 people who are like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What's going on here? And that's where I think you need to be really, sure of your resilience against that sort of lingering storm, because we know how long legal things can drag out. And well, you know what? I wish I billed by the hour. So, I think
Yeah.
it says it all.
I'm with you. And the US is very difficult, not only the legal climate in terms of the litigation and the lawsuits that come with it, but from a privacy and cybersecurity standpoint, we're a real patchwork of laws, rules, and regulations all over the country. There's no real uniform cybersecurity or privacy related rule that all organizations have to abide by. And we see more of that outside of the United States. We see things in the European Union, GDPR, that's been around now for a number of years. Every state here has their own way of managing privacy risk, harm, fallout from data breaches. So, how can anybody keep up with that? If that's not your job, as you mentioned, if you're not a lawyer, and not only just a lawyer, but a lawyer that specializes in cybersecurity and privacy and regulation that have to do with data collection, data sharing, all of that, there's no way to keep up on all of it and to make sure that you're abiding by all of the rules and regulations. Again, a policy can come with a lot of those resources. It can come with access to attorneys who specialize in this and to understand, well, what's the biometric law or rules that Illinois has or Texas has or Washington has, or what is now Virginia doing with regard to privacy and data collection, or California with the CCPA or California Privacy Rights Act, where added on to it, where there's more clarity and there's more rigor around information collection, around who you're sharing it with, what you're responsible for. So the policies can give those types of resources, but you're absolutely right. The costs add up 100%. Not only are you dealing with very expensive costs when there is a breach and you have to bring in a vendor to do the analysis to figure out, okay, who got in, when did they get in, what did they touch, and then did they pull any information out? That is very costly. And then to bring in the appropriate specialists that can let you know, here's who you need to notify, here's the manner in which it needs to be done, here are the timeframes that it needs to be done within. There's so much that goes into it.
I think I touched on how many reports come out of the sort of cybersecurity world about this sort of thing, and we mentioned the Verizon one. And I don't know if this is from this year's or the previous years, but the high-end small business breach cost is $1.24 million. And when I see those numbers without detailed explanation of why, I think, how could it possibly get that high? This is how it gets that high. There's this person. Everyone gets their hand out, and you need these people to fix the problem, and it stacks up really, really quickly.
Completely agree with you. Martin, looking at the costs, we've covered a lot of different things. Now, as we move into remote work, the Internet of Things, the way that we all operate, the way that we're all connected has really changed in the last 5 years. We're so much more spread out. We're so much more digital. There's a lot of crossover between what we're doing professionally, what we're doing personally, the devices that we're using. How do you see this as opening us up, opening organizations up to vulnerabilities, to litigation, to data breaches, ransomware, all of that?
So you sort of touched on it with the hodgepodge of rules that exists across the states in America. There's a hodgepodge of rules about all sorts of things. And one of the examples I heard recently was educational facilities, particularly universities, are susceptible to cyber attack because they have a lot of proprietary information. And I was a technical employee onboarded very quickly to fill a maternity role. And they were onboarded and they were given very little instruction. There was not the formal onboarding process because they were starting in a weird way and someone was on vacation. And 6 weeks into it, they're told that they need to use a VPN if they're working remotely. Like that's some of the most basic stuff. So you get this sort of haphazard reality about it all. I mean, I think that there are all sorts of things that would seem crazy to us, but the Internet of Things is one of the things that I can't get my head around, right? Because these simple little devices like modems or your Wi-Fi enabled dishwasher, they are all entry points into your home. And if you're working from home on sensitive information or even just stuff with a lot of data and say credit cards, you are exposed. So does your LG, pardon me, no LG in particular, but does your washer have a protocol on it to protect you? I don't know. I have a Wi-Fi enabled dishwasher. It's off. I turned it off. I don't need to be able to turn the dishwasher off from my bed. Meanwhile, you hear about them collecting as much as 3 gigabytes of data a day. In a recent example I read of a washer that's Wi-Fi enabled, that's collecting data off your Wi-Fi for the purposes of selling it, because we know data is valuable in a legitimate way as well. So I think that this is, a bit like having an umbrella with 1,000 holes in it. Is the Internet of Things is the way I think about it. Particularly some of the legacy stuff. There's like this digital detritus that exists around our lives that we don't quite appreciate, how all these older systems and older devices create vulnerability. And then you move into the public Wi-Fi space. I had a meeting the other day, and our next podcast is about personal cybersecurity and cyber insurance. And these cybersecurity experts, they don't use public Wi-Fi. They use MiFis everywhere they go. They don't plug into airport charging ports. They don't even use the plug, the power plug at places like airport lounges, because it's a bit like the skimmers on ATMs and at the 7-Eleven or wherever it might be. It's so easy to make it look normal, seem innocuous, and boom, you've opened the door for someone.
It's this fine line between being the appropriate amount of paranoid versus, what can I actually do, or what am I maybe too stressed out about that isn't going to bring harm? I mean, you're exactly right. There are some basic things that we can all do to be more secure. Certainly, if you're going to be on public Wi-Fi, I hope most people know, don't be logging in or don't look at things that are very confidential or very private, because just as you mentioned, yeah, it can look like you're accessing the Starbucks Wi-Fi or the McDonald's Wi-Fi, but it's so easy for somebody to pop up right next to you and broadcast. They can call that signal whatever they want. And if you're connecting in through them, they are watching every single thing that you're doing. So you just need to understand it's understanding how the technology works. If you're connecting to somebody else's hotspot that they've created, they're monitoring you, they're watching you, they're looking at you. So it's important to keep those things in mind. It puts you at risk and it opens you up.
The big Fortune 10 companies, when they're having a big conference, they will monitor the Wi-Fi in that area months before, during, and then after the conference, and they'll see this spike of Wi-Fi networks during the conference because they know people are coming in to, try and steal stuff. And so their security protocol is to at least see the playing field. That's what the big boys are doing. So you think you're being paranoid? You're not being paranoid. You're suitably worried about the risk that's there.
Yeah, 100%. Now, as we move, there's so much more that we can go into on this, but I think an important thing that we need to talk about as we look to wrap all of this up are AI related threats. I know a lot, again, we briefly touched on the use of AI for phishing, for data collection and putting profiles together on individuals, but AI is used in all different types of facets. One could be deep fakes or cloning voices. So you think you're talking to the CEO or the CFO, or you think you're looking at the CEO or the CFO on screen when it's not the case. The bar to do these things and to take advantage of the technology has really come down. More companies are coming in. They're creating very advanced tools that can be utilized, and they're lowering the bar in terms of the expertise that's needed to access them. What are you seeing on the AI front?
So I'll give you an example. I mentioned the podcast we've got coming up about personal cybersecurity. One of the pieces of advice is that your family should have a code word or a code phrase, so that when someone spoofs your child's voice and they call saying that they've been arrested and you need to Venmo $1,000 to this person so they can get bailed out, you can say, oh, okay, well, what was the dog's first name? And the answer is a blue Volvo, right? Something innocuous, something you all know. That's the level of advice that's being granted in this space with regard to protecting yourself against AI spoofing. We touched on the Hong Kong-based guy who approved a video conference after going through several steps to verify a $28 million wire transfer that was entirely fraudulent and AI generated. Right? I didn't believe it. I thought it was an inside job. I looked into it, and it was a UK company with a Hong Kong-based employee, and it happened, right? There is, and again, we are at the beginning of this. This is the Model T Ford version of artificial intelligence. And just like all things, it will change and grow very quickly for good and sinister reasons.
I agree, Martin. And I always say this is the worst that it will ever be. And this is a space that evolves so fast. So in terms of like the picture quality, in terms of the output for the way that things are written or phrased, the quality of the text to video, it's only getting better from here on out. So again, it's in the power of the people, the person that's utilizing it. What is their motive? Are they using it for good? Are they using it for efficiencies? Or are they using it to take advantage of people? Are they using it for harm? You talked about having the code word. I think that's so important. I've seen a number of cases where they're quote unquote kidnapping a child and they're saying, look, you better pay up. And they think that they're speaking to their daughter or their son. So having the code word is so important because it's only going to get better. It's only going to get harder to detect these things. And again, that's the importance of the conversation that we're having today. So much has evolved, even in the last 12 months, the last 6 months, in terms of the threat landscape, what we're seeing from ransomware, business email compromise, supply chain attacks. It's important to always be up to date on what's happening, how you can protect yourselves, and what you can do from not only a risk management, but an insurance standpoint as well. We've hit that time. Martin, I'm so grateful for your perspective. I'm so grateful for you being here to talk through and share your advice, the things that you've encountered over your career. Is there any remaining things that you want to mention before we close this thing out?
The one thing I would suggest you might do on your own and then suggest to people that you have as clients is create Google alerts for certain phrases that apply to your business, your industry, and then cybercrime and phishing and ransomware in general. And you may get bored with the volume of email you get on these Google alerts, but I think it'll help reiterate the volume of information that exists that goes lost. It doesn't wind up with, like you said early on, it's not sexy, it's not going to lead, it doesn't bleed, so it's not on the cover of the paper, but it's out there. And it's with the aid of something like a Google Alert, something you can have to your inbox once a day, just to keep yourself aware of this pace of change so that you can go to your customers or your broker or whatever it is, that the communication evolves and becomes, a routine part of your business.
I think that's great advice. Again, it's all about education. It's all about awareness that will allow anybody to create a constant stream of information that will keep them up to date on what's going on out there. Martin, thank you for sharing that. I want to thank everybody for taking the time today to be a part of this conversation. This could go on for another 2 hours, no problem. We'll make sure that everybody receives a copy of the discussion that took place today. And I saw a few questions come in that we weren't able to answer. I apologize for that. I'll make sure that we answer them as well when this is sent out. Thank you, everyone, for all of your time. Martin, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you guys all on the next one.